Welcome back. Has the education system killed our creativity? That's what we're looking at today with Sir Ken Robinson, a world-renowned expert on creativity and innovation. He's authored several books, and the latest, The Element, How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything, comes out in January 2009. Sir Ken joins us from Los Angeles, so let's get back to the discussion. Actually, I should ask you what inspired that book, because I know one of the stories there, Gillian the dancer, is a particularly interesting one. Just give us a brief rundown on that.
Well, I was saying, before that my experience is a lot of people don't know what they're really good at, and I got very intrigued by people who do know what they're good at, and started to talk to lots of people about how they found their talent. Gillian Lynn was somebody who was in the 30s. She was at school in Britain in the 1930s. Was thought to have some problem of attention. I think now, as I said at the TED talk you mentioned earlier, that they'd say she had attention deficit disorder. I'm on a bit of a rant about ADHD, to be honest, Riz. I think its incidence is highly exaggerated. A lot of people are being medicated for ADHD or ADD, who I'm convinced are simply dealing with minds that are more lively than the material they're being given to think about. But anyway, that's another conversation. But I know it would have happened with Gillian, and it was recommended that she should go off and maybe have special education. Some people need that, some don't. But she had a psychologist who said to her mother that he didn't think that was the problem at all, that she was really a dancer. She was a very physical thinker. And she went on to lead an extraordinary career as a choreographer. So I was telling a longer version of that story, and I realized that lots of people felt themselves in a way lucky to have discovered their real talent. So I wanted in the book to look at what the difference is. It's called The Element because it's a kind of view that people do their best when they do the thing they love, when they're in their element. And I wondered, what is that? It's about certainly having a natural capacity for something. Gillian for dance, some people for math. But it's also loving it, having a passion for it. So the book is full of conversations and interviews about how other people found their talent. But the book is really about how important it is that you find yours, if you're a parent, if you're a student, or if you work in business. So it's about the issues that follow from that.
And of course, Gillian got the last laugh, becoming a world-famous choreographer earning millions of dollars.
She did, yeah. She choreographed Phantom of the Opera and Aspects of Love, a whole range of collaborations with Andrew Lloyd Webber. I might just say, by the way, I'm from Liverpool in England. I have a large family in Liverpool and went to school there. And I was born in 1950. I know, by the way, Riz, you don't believe that. I can feel that.
No, you look much younger, of course, yeah.
I know, but I live in Los Angeles. I've had work done, but I was, one of the people we interviewed for the book is Paul McCartney, who went to school in Liverpool too. His old school is now a school for the performing arts called the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, a great place. But he was telling me that when he went to school, he wasn't any good at music. And the music teacher didn't think he was any good at music either. He went through the whole of his education and nobody thought he was any good at music. This Paul McCartney, by the way, from the Beatles. One of the other people who had the same music teacher was George Harrison, who was at the same school. And same thing. So this guy, whoever he was, had half the Beatles in his class and missed the fact they might have had some remote talent. So my point is that talent is often buried quite deep, and it doesn't emerge until the conditions are right. So The Element is also about what are the conditions under which talent is identified and can flourish. And I think it's a critical conversation we should have, because for the most part, education, ironically, is not very good at this.
Well, apart from the conditions, obviously it's a case here of a good educator recognizing those talents and allowing them to flourish, as in the case of Gillian.
Yes. When school systems start to think about reform, when politicians do, I think they back the wrong horse. There are three bits to education. There's the curriculum, which is what it's intended people should learn. There's assessment, which is how we figure out how well they're doing. But there's a third strand, which is teaching. And many education systems ignore the importance of the quality of teaching. And ironically, it's the only thing that makes a difference. If you look at the high-performing education systems like Finland or Singapore, they specifically invest in the quality of teachers. And anyway, if you think of your own education, it was individual teachers who made the difference to you, either for good or for bad. They're the things we remember about school, the teachers. And I think if you really want to reform education, you have to have a different view of intelligence, and you really have to respect the importance of creative teaching and invest in that.
I was certainly lucky, I have to say, with some great teachers with whom I'm still good friends. We had an email that came in from Hamdani Mushtaq, who sent in this email saying, in my view, science and math are a foundation for any work we do in life. These subjects are not hampering the development of painters and dancers, but giving them ground to develop. What's your response to that comment?
Oh, I certainly agree with the first part of it. Nothing I'm arguing for is an argument against the importance of math or science. On the contrary, there are two big problems, I think, with many education systems. One is there's a hierarchy, and so some subjects are thought to be more important than others. But they're also separated. You know, the fact is that math and science have enormous amounts in common with art and music and dance. And it's only relatively recent that we've distinguished them. So I certainly think maths and science should be a bedrock of education, but so should dance, and so should art, and so should music. And more importantly, we should see how these things connect. Some of the most extraordinary creative scientists, like Einstein, for example, always said they thought visually. Music helped them to think differently. Some of the most accomplished musicians think very mathematically. You know, we make too much of these distinctions. If you were to look inside a human brain, you don't see it divided into separate subject compartments. And human culture doesn't work that way either. It's really schools that still the connections. And I think we should not be saying arts are more important than sciences. Let's have a different conversation and see how they connect.
I wonder if there'd be anything to be learned from the way sometimes teaching is being developed for autistic children with autism, because perhaps those are more creative in some ways and often looking for different avenues to bring out that talent.
It's very interesting. You know, a long time ago now, I was on a commission with Sir Richard Attenborough on the education of people with disabilities. I had polio when I was a kid, and I still wear a brace. And I went to a school in Liverpool for the physically handicapped for about 5 years. One thing that always struck me is that people with physical disabilities or handicaps of any sort are often assumed, therefore, to be less able in general. And I argue this in the Attenborough report, you know, that one of the problems, one of the reasons we think that people with disabilities are generally disabled is because we have such a narrow view of ability. And it gives us a big view of disability. Right. But I know brilliant people. They may have problems speaking, they may have problems writing, but they may have brilliant minds in other respects. It's why you need a broad curriculum. You know, it's why you need art and music and all the other things as well, because there isn't just one way to think and there isn't just one way to communicate. So you're right. I think this argument has real implications for what we think of as special needs. I mean, the truth is we all have special needs no matter what we do. The problem is we have this narrow view of ability to start with, which marginalizes whole groups of kids from the system.
Let me see if I can squeeze in a couple more email questions. Well, one that came just now by SMS from Nigeria. Amin, thank you for this. It says, how can a teacher induce his creativity and that of his students?
Induce is an interesting word. Right. I think it suggests giving birth to something, doesn't it? That's probably not a bad way to think about it. Well, I think there are two ways of thinking about this. One of them is that you can teach creatively. I know brilliantly creative teachers who use extraordinary techniques and ideas to involve kids in the issues they're concerned with. I remember talking to a French teacher once, a teacher of French, who apologized, who said that, you know, I had to accept that some aspects of learning a language are just boring. I asked her this question because I'd been speaking to her students who were obviously bored with her classes. And she said that some aspects of this were boring. And I said, well, I don't agree. Because the fact is, you can make anything boring, but you can make anything interesting. Right. You know, I'm not aware that there are millions of French students in France every year giving up the French language because it's so tedious, you know, and speaking Danish instead because it's more interesting. Right. You know, you can make anything interesting. So learning and developing your own creative skills as a teacher is vital. But secondly, there is a process of teaching for creativity. And that means understanding the processes by which creativity is promoted and developed. I published a book a few years ago called Out of Our Minds, Learning to be Creative, which is about that very process. But it's a good question because being creative isn't just a question of letting go and doing what you like. It's a pretty disciplined process very often, and there are real skills and techniques to be taught. And I think we should be focusing on those as we develop education for the future.
Well, less than a minute to go. I'll squeeze in another question here from Australia in Sydney, and a regular viewer, S. Anoma, wrote in saying, with the planet overpopulated and various interest groups striving to control the increasingly limited resources, a system of education that focuses on art, painting and dance may change our aspirations and subsequently reduce our consumption. What do you think?
Maybe. But I don't think this is an argument, again, that's just about the arts. I'm very keen to emphasise that. I'm a major proponent of the arts and education.
Right.
I spent a lot of my life arguing for them. But this is for a different curriculum which has a balance between art, science and technology. What is true is that we are facing absolutely revolutionary challenges on Earth with technology,
Right.
the doubling of the world's population, 9 billion people, and creativity has to be at the heart of these new strategies in all disciplines. All
right. Well, sir, there I have to stop you. We've run out of time. I hope we get a chance to chat again. Very interesting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'd love to.
And thank you for being with us. On the next show, we mark a tragic and historic date, September the 11th, 7 years after the attacks on the United States created serious divisions between the West and Muslim world. How much progress has been made in getting things back to normal? We'll see you next time for that.